Okay, this is my second take because on the first take, the film crashed. CN is the Great Tower in Toronto, Canada, and it reminds us of Saruman, the mad wizard in Lord of the Rings, who had a tall tower that he lived in, and he planned the destruction of the world from there. So we always think back to our friend King Ludwig of Bavaria, who talks about the electricity of the ego, because that's what Saruman had. He had an enormous ego, and he wanted to play God with the world and be a very mean-spirited kind of God. Anyway, that's all I can tell you about CN. But as we were talking about recalcitrant spirits, those are spirits or intelligences, I suppose, sentient beings that may or may not be visible to you, but are abusive. So it gets back to the abuse of power, which goes way back to ancient Atlantis. The reason Atlantis fell as a civilization, we are told, was abuse of power. What does abuse of power mean? Infringing upon others, and it usually, well, I'm sure it's 100% due to ego. In other words, I've got the power to monitor you and control you and punish you and do all kinds of things to you. Um, that's one abuse of power. Um, I don't know what other abuses of power are there. Um, Physical abuse of power, someone's just a lot bigger than another person and wants to bully them. So it's a lot of bullying, but it's also infringing upon people's rights and just treating them unkindly, treating them like slaves or chattel. Okay, this says TJ or maybe LT. So if you were a lieutenant in the army and you were leading a charge against dark forces, you might remember a movie with George Clooney called The Men Who Stare at Goats. And in this movie, there was General Stubblebine, who was very interested in trying to use the human potential movement to get super soldiers. And, well, I don't know what else I can tell you, but if you had this new model army, you could use psychic super soldiers to do soldiering, I suppose. And as far as this talk goes, well, if you had people who had, let's call them psychic abilities, there was the great Ingo Swann and Hal Puthoff and Major Ed Dames, who worked for the American government doing what was known as remote viewing. And that was basically people were trained to psychically spy. What other possibilities exist for, well, there was Obi-Wan Kenobi in Star Wars, and he used his mind power to convince some stormtroopers that these weren't the droids you're looking for. Famous line. What else? I don't know. Do I have psychic powers? I hate to say no. Maybe they're not online, but what psychic powers I do have is I have sort of shaman powers. I have the ability to communicate with other kinds of beings, and I have some certain healing abilities. Reiki, it's fairly common among many people. And the question that came to my mind was, do you have to be initiated into Reiki in order to give hands-on healing? Um, I don't know. But if you haven't been initiated into hands-on healing and there's someone there and there's two or three of you, I would recommend that you do put your hands on the person or just above the person and intend to send love to this person that it needs some healing. I think it's going to work, but I haven't tested it. Doing Reiki, I had more than one person who was initiated into Reiki work on me, and it was lovely. What else? Okay, this is Big Rack. Maybe someone who's interested in moose or elk. If you were involved with serrying around, serrying means going from one world to another. What kind of world? Well, various versions of planet Earth, perhaps, or maybe you want to go to another timeline or something. Anyway, the point of it is, if you were going anywhere near elk, you better give them a wide berth, because they are a very large animal with huge antlers, and basically they could run you down if they didn't take a liking to you. Same with moose. They're very big. I wouldn't get close to them. I would treat them the same way I would treat a bear. I would give them a lot of space, because moose and bears can run faster than humans. And, so if you see large animals and you're in your car, remember that even large animals with large antlers could come up and probably, most possibly, smash through your little flimsy glass in your side windows, and so don't expect that just being in a car is going to protect you. One time when I was in the Rocky Mountains, I saw an enormous ram, a male deer with huge, what do you call them, horns. And it was quite a spectacular sight to see. And again, that's another animal I would give a very large amount of space. And we were in cars, and we were kind of not going too close still, because that thing probably could come up and ram your car if it didn't like you. And how do you know if it likes you or not? I don't think you want to stick around too long. The end result of this talk about large animals is, no, they'd want to say, no, I'm not talking about hunting them, but giving these beings, because they are beings, we call them animals, but they're beings, giving them respect, mostly because they're bigger than you, and secondly, because it's very hard to know what gets into their minds, whether they're going to take a dislike to you or not. So why get really close to dangerous animals? Why get very close to dangerous other kinds of beings? Well, I don't know. Why do you want to get close to dangerous beings? Well, maybe you want to learn about them. You're curious about them. Do you want to study great white sharks? I don't know. Why are we talking about this? Well, it's mostly because if you're still talking about, as in my previous talk, about recalcitrant spirits, that is, spirits that don't want to learn and are always putting their feet in their mouths to chew on their toes. No, more likely they're just up to mischief. And why did they want to get involved with little humans that can't seem to protect themselves? Mostly because they haven't taken the warning that I've given them, that you don't know what other beings are around you that are stronger, tougher than you, and who might not take kindly to seeing you abusing other beings. It gets back to also humanity, because humans are incredibly brainwashed into doing things the way we do, building walls between the United States and Mexico, making a moat and putting alligators in there. I don't think that's very good for wildlife, and certainly no good for humans, but Mr. Trump wants to do that. But, eating other animals for food is constantly done by humans. And In some cases, the ground beef is cheaper than the vegetable substitute. Why is that? Well, it's all greed on the part of corporations primarily. And, what is your responsibility? Well, you have to keep feeding your body. And what about, eating animals, growing animals so they can be eaten? Well, it's very difficult because some people have a really hard time if a hunter comes along and shoots a moose. They say, or a deer. Oh, I could never do that. I could never do that. It's horrible what you're doing. But those same people go down to the grocery store, the meat department, and buy ground beef or steaks or chicken. It smells like hypocrisy, doesn't it? And, it's difficult too because in my town, it's very hard to find vegetation. It's very hard to find vegetarian restaurants. All of the restaurants in my town, well, pretty much, anyways, there really isn't a peanut butter sandwich place. They're all pretty much selling meat. And I mean, sometimes you can get a meatless salad or something, but if you're a hungry person, I guess you could have a vegetarian pizza. Is eating cheese abusive to milk cows? Where do you draw the line? Anyway, there could be beings out there that look at humans and say, well, your human society consumes a lot of animals and you seem to enjoy it. And maybe you're abusing the animals. No one really asked the animals. And maybe they want to punish humans for being mean to these domesticated food animals. And there's so many other things that humans do that might piss off other kinds of beings. Most of the stuff that we do, we're pretty much, what are the things? Well, pollutions. Who pollutes the most? Well, we always think it's big corporations that pollute. But, I mean, your car, they say carbon dioxide is your pollution, but in the old days, there used to be a lot of spewing of fumes and unburnt gasolines. And with catalytic converters, those ones really are taken away and converted to carbon dioxide and water. Is carbon dioxide actually a pollutant? Well, I don't know how you're going to get around this planet today without burning carbon dioxide. So, is it true that there are patents for non polluting alternatives? Well, yes, I'm sure there are. It's been released that there are thousands of patents in the US Patent Office that are being withheld from the population due to national security, which is basically the oil companies own the government and they don't want you to have these other things because then if they give you free energy, then they can't make any money. And it's all about sex, money, and power. What else do we want to talk about? Georgia. Uh, I don't know. What do you want to talk about Georgia for? Atlanta? I don't know. I bought this hat and I put it on, and I don't really have anything to talk about. I'm not going to talk about Bible Belt. I've got 10 seconds. How about 10, 9? I gotta go. I'll think about something for Georgia.